Hello you guys, welcome back to another video. It has been a while since we've done an election video like this, but I'm finally back to it now, and we're going to go quite fast through the beginning portion of this, because we are going through FDR's terms. If you don't know, FDR is like one of the most popular and most famous presidents of American history. He's the only one who's gotten 4 terms in office, although he didn't finish his 4th term, but still anyway. And here we are looking at the 1932 election, which is the first one we're going to talk about today. This is the real map, so this is what happened in reality, and you can see it was a huge sweep, 472 electoral votes, 57% of the popular vote. He had below 40, which is shocking, but I guess not that shocking because we are looking at Hoover right here, if you couldn't tell. And you see just safe states everywhere. The only place he did not do very well was New England and the Rust Belt, and then some parts of what used to be progressive territory. Very interesting and very clear cut. If you've seen these before, you know that this is based on a voting system that I put in place for my subscribers about a couple months ago, although it's still open if you want to vote. It had like over 500 votes in it, which is really cool. And so, with an election this close, moving the percentages around, it's going to be very hard to get Hoover to win a second term here. But let's just go over it really quickly. This won't take long at all, I'll tell you that much. Alrighty, so if you've watched these videos before, you know we go safe states first, and then we go down to the wire. That is what we're going to do for this election. And let us start with, who should we pick? Let's go with the Democrats' safe states for your guys' election, your custom election, and we'll see after that how it stacks up to the actual election. So without further ado, the safe states in this election are Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Illinois, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, North and South Dakota, Kansas, Nebraska, or that might be flipped, whoops, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, and that is what we are left with. Those are the safe states for this election. Now let's compare that to the real election. You can see the support for Republicans over here has been completely wiped off the map, which makes a lot of sense. The Rust Belt, which was doing quite well, has all been solidified as well. It's just unsurprising, really. And I'll tell you what, there's only really 2 states that are actually interesting. That first state is going to be the state of Maine. You can see in real life it was a likely Republican state. And in this map, with all of the momentum towards FDR, we're looking at actually a lean Democrat result there, so they didn't even get to keep Maine. And the other interesting state is going to be the state of Vermont. That's this one right here with 3 electoral votes. In real life, we'll actually dive into this one a little bit. In real life, the Dems are at 41% here, which is pitiful, 16 points below the national average. Republicans were at 58 percentage points, and you can really see that on this map. Look how it's the only safe Republican state. And in this, after your guys' voting, it is able to hold by only 2%, and that makes it actually the only Republican state out of the entire electoral map. There we are. Here's the final electoral map for what you guys voted on. You can see we have Hoover with only 3 electoral votes, but he only lost, if you compare to the actual election, he only lost 7% of the national vote, but that's all it takes in the United States to just completely catapult you to a world record, or not world record, but a groundbreaking election where he just gets wiped out. So all of my Hoover fans, I'm sorry, he's gone. But that was quick. Now we can move on to 1936. Holy crap, Hearts of Iron 4. Let's do it. Alrighty, 1936 election. This one is Alf Landon, the Republican candidate, versus FDR going for his 2nd term. Now, in reality, this was even more popular. He was even more popular at this point. But I figured that maybe some people would vote away from him as you get closer to World War II. Vote away from FDR. So we will see. Again, this is the 1932 real map. This is what happened in reality, 1932. And this is what happened in reality in 1936. So you can see that's rough. We went from 39.6% of the vote to 36.5% of the vote, but we also go from 59 electoral votes to 8. Very, very bad. And it's quite a similar story for your poll results as well. But still, let's be thorough. Let's go safe states first for the Dems for 1936 election. FDR versus Alf Landon, they are as follows: Washington, Oregon, Canada, Nevada, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma. Interestingly, not Kansas or Nebraska or whatever this one is, I forgot. But this one is South Dakota, North Dakota, those are all safe states. Minnesota, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. These really shouldn't be surprising. He had the South on lock, no matter how you slice it. Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and those are our safe states for this election. It may look scary at first for FDR. Maybe you won't do as good as before. Let's see if that holds true. Let's get this over with. Boom! This is what you guys decided on for this election. You can see Alf Landon won 34.4% of the vote here, and FDR still gets 62%, which compared to his real life 1936 election, you can see he gained 2%. So you're still voting even more for him than they did historically, which is already impressive considering how much they voted for him historically. But you can see some interesting differences, not many. You can see the solidification of Indiana and also South Dakota as well. And you can also see a little bit of hardening right here for New Hampshire between the two. But that's really it. There's no other difference here. A clean sweep for FDR. He wins his second term again. But this is where it gets interesting and might get a little more intense. Let's go to 1940. Alright, here we are. We've hopped into 1940. You can see this time we are facing off against Wendell Willkie. But still FDR for his third term. This is already like shocking and a break of a precedent, so to say. There wasn't an official amendment saying you could not run 3 times like there is today. But it was kind of just like honor code that was only broken a couple times. I can only really think of Theodore Roosevelt, funnily enough, considering his relation to him. But yeah, here we are in 1940. Now let's show you the historical result. Now historically, as you can see, there's a massive loss of support for FDR here, and some really interesting battles. Look at Indiana and Michigan. These are both tilt states, which is really cool. This could have gone either way. Of course, it did not help him in the end, except for maybe giving him a more acceptable electoral college score, so to say. But you can see in the popular vote, look at that difference from 36.5% for a Republican to 44.8% for the Republican here. That's a huge amount. So we will see how it translates to the actual election, but keep this in mind and keep this safe state map in mind as we go through the safe states here. Alrighty, so the safe states for this election, the 1940 election decided by you guys, are as follows. Washington, still a safe state. Idaho, Montana, Oregon, California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Michigan, and lastly, Maryland. Now, if you compare this to the actual results so far, pay attention to the safe states. You can see, of course, a hardening here. Interestingly, this state, Wyoming, did not harden enough to actually become a safe state on our new map. And you can see Kentucky and West Virginia here. They've solidified as well. Interestingly, the most shocking reversal, I would say, is Michigan. Now, maybe there's still hope. There is the possibility of a sweep in the rest of the Rust Belt, in the Progressive Belt right here, and then also maybe in New England, so let's see. But let's switch to likely states, and let's start off with Republican likely states. There are no Republican solid states, so that is why we are going here, but it does not necessarily mean they won't win states. It just means they will not be solid, which I don't think anyone was really expecting anyway, considering there were no solid states in this election. But anyway, let's go. There are going to be 4 likely states, and it is the same as in real life. That's going to be North Dakota, South Dakota, and then Nebraska and Kansas. Those are all going to be likely states for Republicans. And you're probably thinking, if there are no more likely states, then in actuality there's probably no hope for a Republican win. And you're right. So let's cut to the chase. Let's show the final results. I'm sorry, you guys, Wendell Willkie is not winning this election. Alright, so here we are. Here are the final results for the polling data. Now you can see two interesting states out of the two here. I mean, of course, this is a massive loss for Wendell Willkie. You can see compared to the actual results, we're seeing a loss of 53 electoral votes and about 10% of the popular vote, while FDR has 59% of the popular vote compared to 54. Less of a difference, interestingly. But yeah, this sucks. But let's dive into the interesting states here, and that's going to be Iowa and Colorado. Now in Iowa, which is this state right here, we are looking at in real life, the Dems performing at 48%, which is 13 less than the national average for them, and then the Republicans at 52%, plus 15 above the national average for them. But with the massive surge for FDR, that puts it between, or with less than a point, which is why you see that as a tilt. And then the same is true but opposite for Colorado. For Colorado in real life, the Dems are at 48% and the Republicans are at 51%. And with the results tallied up, we see the Dems at 49%, the Republicans at 48%, and the Socialist Party at 7%, which puts this at a 1-point tilt state. So that's really the main interesting thing about this, other than just the massive change in percentages for Republicans and then also change in electoral votes. So you can guess that that is because, and since you don't see a lot of that draining from FDR, that is because of Republicans splitting off and voting for the Socialist, and it's for my voters, my subs, voting for the Socialist way more. I think in this election he got 7% of the vote or something like that, the Socialist candidate. So that is why you're seeing such a big difference between this loss and this loss compared to real life. You can see the differences are quite exaggerated there. And that's because you guys voted for more socialists. And who's going to eat up those voters? It's going to be the Republicans, at least at this time, which is a weird thing to say maybe nowadays. But yeah, that is 1940. Now, one last election. And if you're still watching, you're not sure if you want to watch till the end, watch till the end, because this one is really close and really interesting. Now, 1944, let's do it. Alrighty, so here we are in 1944. The challenger is going to be the famous Thomas E. Dewey versus FDR. Now, as you can see, I'm about to show you in real life. Again, this is the 1940 election, and this is the jump to 1944. You can see we have a difference between 82 votes, and then we have 99 votes. But you can also see a significant loss in support in some states. You can see a lot more states are closer, and that is most notable in New York. That's going to be very important for this election, is New York. Tom Dewey happens to be from New York and has a great standing in New York, so that really helps him. New Jersey is going to be a tilt state here. Michigan is again a tilt state, and you can see just so many tilt states in real life here. Wisconsin is the same, Ohio is the same. These could have gone either way. They ended up going for Dewey, but it was quite close, and these were quite close to folding as well. So it's a really interesting election, and you guys, for some reason, made this interesting election as well, even more so. I'm not going to spoil it, of course, but here we are. We have our empty map here. And we're going to start off, actually, with the South. I think we're going to do the South first. We're going to go more like what we did in our previous videos, where it's more cutthroat, and we're going to go through an area at a time, from safe state to the heaviest, the closest battles. So without further ado, safe states in the South, unsurprisingly, belong fully to the Democrats, and I'll show you them right now. It's going to be the state of Texas, the state of Arkansas, the state of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, again, not shocking, and then South Carolina. The only interesting thing here is the lack of safe states for these four, which was not how it was in other elections, so we will see if that is maybe telling of something. Anyway, let's move on to likely states. Let's see if we can find any likely states here for the Republicans at all. Alright, so for our southern region, likely states are as follows. It's going to be the state of Oklahoma, and that is going to be a pickup for the Dems. There is a state of Tennessee, another grab for the Dems, and then also Virginia goes to the Dems as a likely state. Now let's take a step back and let's compare it to real life. As you can see here, there is not much difference except for the states of Tennessee and the state of Virginia. You can see they have lost support. They went from safe to likely, although I'm not sure if that is going to cause a big enough difference to change the course of the election, but it is interesting to see these changes from safe to likely. Again, safe is above 15%, and then likely is 15 to 5%. So anyway, let's move on. See if there's any lean states in the South. Alrighty, there's one lean state in what I'm considering the southern region out of all of these, and this is where it gets close because the battle is not here. I think FDR wins South Carolina always, but like 88 to 98%. It's insane to see numbers like that. But anyway, the battle is between these kind of border states, just like how it was in the Civil War. That is what gets fought between. And for Kentucky, the fight goes to Dems. Dems are able to hold on to Kentucky, although as a lean state, which is less than 5 points, meaning that if 5% more switched to the Republicans, this might have been actually a flip. But let's see again. You can see this is moving from a likely state to a lean state. Again, kind of worrying for FDR as of now. But again, this is a very solid hold, and he doesn't have too much to worry about just yet. And hopefully we can help him out right now by going over to the West Coast, where there are some bulwarks here, as we've seen in the last election, in these states right here, and this whole western coast is kind of the blue wall as it is today. Alrighty, I'm going to consider this area to be all the way to here, so Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico are going to be the border, so we're going to do everything to the west of there. Now, for safe states for this area, interestingly, there are none. There are no safe states here for either party, so things are definitely getting interesting. Let's move on to likely states. Alrighty, likely states for the West Coast include the state of Washington. That actually is a Dem likely state. The state of California, that's a big win for FDR, and that is going to be a state that he gets. And then also the state of Arizona goes to him, as does the state of Utah. Let's compare this right now to the actual in real life version, and you can see that these safe states have gone down to likely. These states were quite close, so we will see how that turns out. But we are not done with likely states. Let's keep moving on. The next likely state is going to be the state of Wyoming, and the state of Wyoming is a likely state for Republicans, and so is the state of Colorado. We actually have a good bit of red on the map. Hooray. Very neat. That, though, is it for likely states. Everything else here is closer than likely, which means that it is less than 5 points, which is pretty interesting. A big swing here either way could completely change this map. Let's see how you guys swung. Now for lean states, let's start off with the state of Idaho. That ends up being a lean state, and interestingly, it becomes a lean state for Republicans. They get to grab that, and that is going to be their first flip of the night. You can see this was a Dem state. It won. It was given to FDR in reality, but in this, that's not true. So very neat. Let's see what else can happen here. Let's move on to the other lean states. The next lean state is going to be the state of Montana, and I'm categorizing that as a Dem lean state. They don't quite get that, unfortunately, maybe if you want Dewey to win. Also, a lean state is going to be the state of Nevada. That is the last lean state here. Everything else are tilt states, which are less or equal to 1 point. So very tense. But this is going to be a lean state for the Dems, so they get to keep that as well. Again, a big difference between real life and this election so far, but maybe not enough of a difference to cause a different result. Now let's finish connecting our states from the south into the west with New Mexico. Now, New Mexico in real life is an interesting case because it got, in percentages, the same as the actual popular vote, the national percentage. And that was 53% for the Dems and 46% for the Republicans, less than 1% for the Socialists. But in this election, you guys voted for the Socialists 9.2%. So that is a +9 for Socialists here, and that does mess with it quite a bit. Now, at the end of the day, with everything, the Republicans end up with 45% of the vote, and Democrats end up with 46% of the vote. They are able to keep the state of New Mexico just barely by 1 point. So very crazy there, very crazy indeed. The last one is going to be the state of Oregon. Now the state of Oregon is quite a similar story, as in they almost had the same percentages as a national average with one key difference. In Oregon, in real life, they had 52% for the Dems and Republicans with 47%, which means the Republicans did better by a point, the Dems did worse by a point, and the Socialists actually got rounded 1% of the vote in this state, which is, of course, much better than 0. So with this already being 9%, this leaves 10% of the vote for the Socialists, 46% of the vote for Republicans, and 45% of the vote for Democrats, meaning that this is actually another flip, as you can see right there, to the Republicans just barely by 1 percentage point again. So you can see we already have 10 extra electoral votes for Dewey, but it all will be decided very soon. This is going to be a massive decisive point, and then of course the East Coast is going to be another massive decisive point. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so for the middle part of the United States, we're going to count up to here, and there are actually safe states on this one, unlike this last section, and those are going to be the states of South Dakota, and then Nebraska and Kansas. So these three are going to be safe states. Now if we look at the actual result, you can probably tell what these are going to be. They are going to stay safe states for Dewey. Alright, next up are going to be likely states. Now again, likely states are going to be between 15 and 5 points. So let's get into it. There are actually a few likely states in this kind of bunch right here. There's only 2 though. The first one is going to be North Dakota, so South Dakota's friend right here, and that is going to be a win for the Republicans. There they are there. And then the state of Iowa is also going to be a win for Republicans. So let's look at that compared to the actual map. You can see no change here in electoral vote count. These states did go to Dewey, but you can see a solidification, not in North Dakota to a point where it becomes a safe state, although it probably was quite close. But you can see that in Iowa becoming what it was a lean state, which is less than 5, and now being tucked into a likely column. Now next up is going to be those lean states like we were just talking about. Those are less than 5 points. So these are the ones where it is really close. The first one is going to be the state of Missouri. Now in real life, Missouri was Dems at 51%, they won the state, and Republicans at 48%, with the Socialists getting 0%. Again, Socialists are our third party that got much more of the vote in your guys' election, 10% almost, compared to 0% here. So that leaves the Socialists at 9%. Now the Dems and the Republicans kind of traded blows, but they did quite close to a national average. But anyway, after everything is said and done, we have the Socialists at 9%, the Democrats at 44%, and the Republicans at 47%. This is another flip for Dewey, and so far, FDR has not gotten a single state from this block, which may be worrying. But remember that he has this block that could still really help him out and get him over the finish line, so don't think it's over just yet. Next, let's move on to the state of Illinois, a very big state in electoral votes, and let's check it out in real life. In real life, the Dems came out with 52% of the vote, so only one less than the national average, and then Republicans came in at 48% of the vote, doing slightly better than the national average, but still quite close to that, which of course was a losing average. But with everything said and done, here we are. The Socialists end up with 9% of the vote, Democrats end up with 45% of the vote, and Republicans end up with 47% of the vote. Another Republican win, and a huge one at that. 28 electoral votes is nothing to laugh at, especially considering if you look in real life, of course that was a Dem hold, and Dewey only got 99 votes, so this is a huge chunk of what he actually got historically already being given to him. Very interesting indeed. Now next up is the very contentious state of Wisconsin. I say it's contentious because in the actual election it was one of the closest states. You can see I put it as a tilt margin, which means that is less than or equal to 1 point, and in real life, after rounding, it is 50% for the Dems and 49% for the Republicans, and actually 1% for the Socialists. I got 1% here, which makes sense if you know your history. But anyway, you can see that's super close. But then accounting for what you guys voted for in your poll, it is no longer that close, although it is still a lean margin for the Republicans with 48% of the vote compared to Democrats at 43% of the vote. Next up is going to be our tilt margins, which means either the party that held the state originally was able to hold it just barely, or the opposing party was able to take it just barely by less than or equal to 1%. Now, if you look at the map, you can see it looks to be the same characterization as Illinois and Missouri, which both went to the Republicans in this election, in this community election. But that might not be the case here. The Democrats may be able to hold on to it, and it would be a very nice state to hold on to in the sea of red, just because 11 electoral votes is nothing to laugh at. Anyway, let's look at it in real life. In real life, the Dems had 52% of the vote, and Republicans had 47% of the vote, with Socialists having 0%. Now, after everything, that leaves the Socialists with 9%, and the Democrats at 45%, and the Republicans at 46%. It's another grab for the Republicans, and at this point it is not looking very good for FDR. He may be able to clinch something out here, but I'm not quite sure. Now that means that in this entire block, FDR won nothing. Zip. Nada. He almost was able to hold on to Minnesota, just barely. But it just wasn't to pass. Although something similar did happen with New Mexico. I guess he can be thankful for that, but that's 4 electoral votes versus 11. And the Republicans are at 117 electoral votes, while FDR is at 200 electoral votes. Now, for FDR to win with 200 electoral votes that he has right now, he would need to get, actually let's look at the actual election, he would need to hold on to just Pennsylvania and New York. That would be good for him, especially considering he's more likely to hold on to these states right here in New England. So if he can hold on to that, he can win the election. Now, for Dewey to win the election, he has to get New York at least, hopefully sweep this as well, and maybe hold on to some sort of thing right here with Maine and with Vermont. So that is what he needs to do in order to win. Let's see if it comes to pass. Let's start off with New England. Now, in New England, which I'm going to count as this little area, the area that is New England and Hoi 4, if you know, you know, there is one safe state, and that's going to be the state of Vermont, as we just mentioned, and Dewey gets to keep this safe state. Not very surprising if we look at the actual results. You can see, and again, remembering that this is an election that FDR won, this is one of the stronger Republican holdouts, comparable to over here. So, not too surprising there. But that is the only safe state of the bunch, which means everything else is more contentious. Now we move on to likely states, and there are only 2 likely states in this whole bunch. The first likely state is going to be a state of Rhode Island. Republicans do well in Rhode Island, as do third parties a lot of the time. But in this election, it was not enough to stop FDR. He actually gets to pick up the first state he's picking up in a while. And this may be a good sign for Massachusetts. This may also be a very good sign for New York and Pennsylvania. And the next likely state, unsurprisingly, is going to be Maine for the Republicans. You can see in real life this was a lean state, and so it is not too unsurprising to see it turn into a likely state. Alright, let's move on to the more tight ones. Let's move on to lean states. Alrighty, there is only one lean state that we can count out of this little block of states in New England, and that is actually going to be the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire, as we can check in this election, it looks to be a lean Democrat state, which gives it a pretty good position here. As you can see, that is true of a lot of New England as well, except for New Jersey, interestingly. So let's see if that holds up in this election. Now, in real life, New Hampshire had the Dems at 52% and the Republicans at 48%, with the Socialists, after rounding, at 0%. Which means, of course, Socialists end up at 9%, Democrats end up with 45%, and Republicans end up with 47%. They get to take New Hampshire as well. Now it's not looking good. We're seeing a more solid northeast here. But we still have these big, beautiful states right here with huge electoral vote counts. And really, FDR only needs either Ohio and Pennsylvania. He needs Pennsylvania and New York, or he needs some kind of mix that maybe includes Michigan or Indiana. So there's still pathways, although Dewey is doing quite well here. You can see that is another flip from lean to lean, which is a 10% jump. Now we are done with lean states. We are moving into the tilt category, and we have 2 states, as you can see, that are left in this chunk, and they're both tilt. We'll start off with the more rewarding one of the 2. That's going to be Massachusetts, and I've had to put these in decimal form to make sure of all of this. So let's go. In real life, the Dems got 52.8% of the vote, and Republicans got 46.99% of the vote, which is a minus 0.6 for the Dems compared to the national average, and plus 1.09 for the Republicans compared to the national average. The Socialists got 0%, negligible. Now, after everything is said and done, the Socialists end up with 9%. Of course, we're very used to that by now. The Republicans end up with 45.59%, and the Democrats end up with 45.7%, meaning that the Democrats are able to hold on to Massachusetts by 0.11. It's quite close. I had to actually do more work for this state. I'm not happy with you, Massachusetts. But there we go. Maybe this is the halt to Republicans over here. We can see compared to the national average, this one's actually even more shocking. We can see this is not even a lean state. It's a likely state. Sure, it's on the lower end of the likely column, but still, turns into a lean state, or turns into a tilt state. That's quite impressive. Now the state of Connecticut, that's this little rectangular state right here. And in real life, the Dems got 52% of the vote, the Republicans 47%, and the Socialists actually were able to get 1% of the vote here, which is very interesting. That means the Socialists end up at 10% instead of 9%, and the Democrats end up with 45%, and the Republicans end up with 46%, being able to sweep this state. Now again, you can see here that that is a likely state turning into a flip for the Republicans. It's in the same boat as Massachusetts, although they were able to hold on to Massachusetts just barely. It is not the case with Connecticut. Alrighty, next up, let's see, we can either do this block or we can do this block. I think let's finish up the Rust Belt here, and let us do the Rust Belt. Now, there are no solid states in the Rust Belt, and I'll tell you there are no solid states for the rest of the video. So we're going to move straight on to likely for these three. Now, there are two likely states out of the bunch, and that is going to be Ohio and Indiana. Again, these are very pivotal for the election. If FDR loses these, he has to retain these to win, or else there's no other pathway except maybe holding on to New Jersey somehow. It gets very, very difficult to win here. So let's categorize these. Indiana and Ohio, that we can see went to Republicans in the real election, also are going to Republicans in this election, both as likely states. Now this already brings the Republican total up to 175 electoral votes, which means that they have surpassed real-life Dewey by almost double, and are getting close to 200, which is very good news for them, but it is not over yet, and as we can see in real life, these ended up being lean states, but who knows what will happen, especially with these states being how they are. Socialist interference might actually mess up the Republican vote. So we will see if that can save the Democrats and save FDR his fourth term, which, by the way, he would only live a year out of that, but still, let's still keep on going. But first, let's finish off the Rust Belt. And the Rust Belt is going to end with Michigan, and that is going to be a lean state. Now we can see, if we check the real map, that Michigan is categorized similarly to New Jersey. So expect whatever happens here to also happen to New Jersey. And we can see here that it is a Democrat tilt, so not the best news. Let's see if that somehow holds up. Again, socialist support is really what FDR is hoping for, ironically. But it is not enough in this election. It goes from a tilt Democrat state to a lean Republican one, and again is making this North versus South thing very apparent. In real life, let's check it out. It was very close in real life, of course, like we've seen. The Dems were at 50%, the Republicans at 49%, with the Socialists at 0%, so socialism did not play a part in this. And after everything, the Socialists are at 9%, the Dems are at 43%, and the Republicans are at 48%. So if they got a point extra, this would actually be pushed to the likely column, meaning that all of these would have been likely, and this video would have been shorter because we could have all done it all in one thing, but whatever. This is still a big win for Dewey, and FDR is now pushed, both literally and pretty much physically here, into a corner. He has to retain New York and Pennsylvania, and he needs to pick up some of these states as well for some sort of cushion here. It's going to be super close. So let's move on. Now, like I just said, if you can expect something like this, you can expect something about the same for New Jersey, and that is true. It's our only likely state, and it is also a win for Republicans. You can see just how different this map is becoming already, and now Dewey is probably very excited and has a very good chance of winning at this point, but not 100%. Let's keep it on. Everything else from here is going to be tighter. Well, since that was our only likely state, that means we are officially on to lean states now, which again is less than 5 points. And let's just pick a state. Let's see. Let's get this little one right here, Delaware. Now let's check it out. In the actual election, you can see it is a likely state, although that does not mean too much security in an election like this. Let's see how it was in real life. In real life, the Dems overperformed here by 1 point, which we haven't seen too much so far, except, of course, barring the South. And the Republicans got 45% of the vote, which is a -1 compared to the national average, so not good there. The Socialists did not get enough to garner 1% of the vote. And so after everything, the Socialists have 9% of the vote, the Dems have 47% of the vote, and Republicans have 44% of the vote, meaning that this is a hold for the Democrats. Every little part helps, so this is good news. Even if it looks bad right now, this is good news. Now let's move on. Let's pick one. Ooh, I probably should have even covered this when we did this. Oh well. West Virginia, let's see. In real life, the Dems had 55% of the vote there, and Republicans had 45% of the vote, with Socialists at 0% of the vote. This means this is a very similar story to Delaware, and actually a +4 state for the Democrats. Another good sign, and maybe a sign of some sort of hold here. Again, really banking on the Socialists for everything here, funnily enough. Let's keep going with our lean states. We do have some more. Now, the next two lean states are Pennsylvania and Maryland, which means that the way Pennsylvania goes is going to decide the election right now. This is it. Whoever wins this wins the election. So of course, let's stall on that and let's do Maryland first. Alright, Maryland. Alright, so in real life, Maryland had Dems at 52% of the vote and Republicans at 48% of the vote, with the Socialists getting kind of close, but not enough to get 1% of the vote, so they're stuck at 0, which means the very recognizable 9% for them, and Democrats at 45% and Republicans at 47%, meaning that they actually get to take Maryland. Alright, this is it. This decides the election. We only have 2 states left. These are the most pivotal, and we're going to start with Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania in real life had the Dems at 51% of the vote and Republicans at 48% of the vote, and interestingly, the Socialists also get 0% of the vote. Again, that's what we were hoping on. That may be a warning sign here. Now, in the end, we have Socialists at 9% of the vote, Democrats at 44% of the vote, and Republicans at 47% of the vote. Thomas Dewey has won the election, and I think this is the first election that we've had where the presidential candidate that won in our timeline did not win in this timeline. FDR is not getting his 4th term, although he wouldn't have lived through it very long anyway. This opens up a lot of things to the world. This opens up a lot for alternate history. I'd be interested in the comments if you guys know anything more about Dewey, what you think would happen because of this change. But yeah, very cool to see. This map is beautiful, by the way. Let's finish off with New York real quick and see if this is a little less humiliating for FDR. Alrighty. So in New York, the Dems had 52% of the vote and Republicans only had 47% of the vote, and the Socialists, interestingly, did not get enough to go over 1%, although it kind of makes sense given the situation, I guess. That means that this is going to be a tilt state. It's going to be very close. The Socialists are going to have 9% of the vote. The Democrats are going to have 45% of the vote, and the Republicans are going to have 46% of the vote, meaning that this election is finished, and now we have the final tally. As you can see, FDR ends up with 231 electoral votes, or in only 46.3% of the popular vote, meaning that Dewey won with less of the popular vote, which is really cool. It's always really neat when that happens, really interesting, especially for non-Americans when something like that happens. But yeah, it has happened this time. Only 44.5% of the country voted for him, but he's winning this election. Very cool. Now you can see he has 300 electoral votes, FDR at 231. Let's compare that to the real results. You can see 99 to 300 and 231 compared to his 432 electoral votes. And you can see his approval rating dropped by only about 6-7%, which is pretty interesting. That causes this much of a shift. Boom, from here to here, from here to here. Very cool. This is the most fun one yet. I'm sorry if this video is a little bit longer, just because we had to cover his initial elections, even though those were so cut and dry. It's not even funny. Let's move on, lastly, to a little comparison of all of the FDR elections we've done in this video. Alrighty, so here we are all the way back at 1932, where we first started. You can see we're back with Hoover and FDR. This is the real election, and we're just going to go and see FDR's decline in real life first, and then through our votes second. So you can see he goes from 472 electoral votes here to 523 electoral votes here to 449 electoral votes in 1940, and then in 1944 he goes down to 432 electoral votes. So 472, 523, 449, 432. Alright, let's compare that to our poll results. So in 1932 in real life he got 472 electoral votes, while in this election he got 528 electoral votes. In 1936 in real life he got 523 electoral votes, while in our community poll he got 523 electoral votes. It did not change. Now in 1940 he only got 449 electoral votes, and in our 1940 he got 496 electoral votes, interestingly. So he only lost 3 there. And lastly, in his last election he got 432 electoral votes, while in our election he only got 231 electoral votes. So let's just see this smoothly through our community poll. There we go, 1932, 1936, 1940, 1944. He must have said something really bad on the radio or something like that, I don't know. But you guys did not want him to serve 4 terms, or maybe it was Dewey himself as a candidate that was more interesting to you guys. There's also the addition of the third-party candidate doing much better. There was no third-party candidate for 1940 in our vote, and the same is true in 1932. I did put one in 1936, but interestingly, he only got 3% of the vote, compared to 9.2% for 1944. Overall, really interesting, really cool. I'm glad I had you guys on this journey. This was really fun. I thank you guys for watching to the end. Thank you so much for my members on the screen now. And that is about it for this video. I'll see you guys next time for 1948. See ya.